We're starting the first conversation, which is from Ballots to Betrayal, Debriefing Kenya's electoral journey, looking at our elections from 2007 to 2022. And for this, we will have our distinguished moderator, who is a law and governance expert, a distinguished legal scholar, an elections expert, an ICJ member, and someone who has contributed to a lot of ICJ Kenya's body of work on the issue of elections. She has been the proud drafter of our 4 compendiums, and we cannot thank you enough, Lucianna, for both being a technical expert but also agreeing to moderate the session. So I'll hand it over to you, and I wish you the best in your discussions. Tumpigie makofi.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We just had a nice session this morning, and we have also had So I believe this is a good time to delve into the meat of the discussion, which is a dialogue which, according to your program, is titled, Where Have We Been? Debriefing Kenya's Democracy. And so in this session, what we will be doing is looking at Kenya's electoral journey from 2007 to 2022. And the session is titled From Ballots to Betrayals. I'll just start by talking about what I believe the organizers of this session wanted to get. And my understanding of the concept is that they wanted to create a space where we don't just look at institutions and laws, but we also get a chance to share lived experiences, hopes, and betrayals that have shaped our political life. I believe I speak for everyone in the room when I say that we gather today against a backdrop of increased anxiety about the future of Kenya's democracy. When we adopted the Constitution in 2012, there was such promise. The Constitution envisioned a just, participatory, and inclusive state. But for many Kenyans, that promise remains elusive. Instead, we face a shrinking civil space. We have widening inequality, and Waindi spoke about this morning. And we have an increasingly securitized response to dissent. And yet, even in this climate, we have seen extraordinary signs of civic courage. So the Gen Z-led protests in June 2004 reminded us that Kenya's democratic spirit is still alive, that a new generation is not waiting for permission to demand dignity, justice, and voice. Their mobilization was not just a moment, it was a message that our democracy must serve the people and not power. One journalist who was reflecting on the recently released documentary Blood Parliament had this to say: "Watching Blood Parliament left me hollow, shaken, and profoundly heartbroken. Angst, helplessness, watching lives snatched away as if they meant nothing. And it's a solemn vow forming quietly in the heart. Never forget, never." This reaction, to my mind, underscores the deep emotional impact and the collective grief we experience as Kenyans, reflecting on the challenges facing the nation's democratic journey. So this afternoon, we will have a discussion about reckoning where have we come from, tracing our path from the post-2007 crisis to today's very fragile equilibrium. We are going to take stock of the legal, the political, and the civic terrain we have traveled. We also must be honest about where have we faltered. But it's not just about a postmortem. We are also here to craft a vision. We must imagine what will come next and who must lead the journey into the future. To have this conversation, I am very privileged to be joined by a panel of very incisive thinkers, organizers, people who have not just analyzed Kenya's democratic evolution, but they have also shaped it. Over the next hour, we will explore legalism, civic resistance, institutional failure, and the path to democratic renewal. Our aim is not just to reflect, it's also to provoke. It's to ask hard questions, but it's also to build a shared understanding so that this citizens' assembly can help catalyze a bold, citizen-driven, reform process that our moment demands. So allow me to introduce my panelists for this discussion, starting to my far left, Evans Ogada, who is the chair of the Democracy and Governance Committee of the East African Law Society. He's also a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and a member of ICJ Kenya. To my next left, immediate left, is Felix Odhiambo, Executive Director, Elgia. He's also a governance specialist and civic engagement advisor. And to my right is Marcus Ageng'a, who is a program coordinator, Elections Observation Group. The three gentlemen who are here will help me take apart this conversation, and then at the end we will open it up to plenary. So I'd like us to now begin this dialogue. And I want to take us back to, there was a journey that was painted this morning. Oliver took us back to 2002. Whenever I think about 2002, I remember Uhuru Park and people hanging on every tree alive to witness the swearing in of Mwai Kibaki. And he reminded us of Kenya being declared the most optimistic nation on earth. So there was a moment when we were charged with hope. We were all there to celebrate the shared struggle and the culmination into a new democratic order. And we then fast forward into the 2010 Constitution, where we got a new constitutional instrument. But we have also noted there has been a very strange recurring pattern. Elections are held in Kenya, votes are cast, but in the aftermath, we have elite bargains and post-election deals, what we are happy to call handshakes. Citizens watch helplessly as coalitions shift, opposition voices are co-opted, and the clarity of their vote is muddied by political expediency. This has bred a deep sense of disillusionment and a sense that while the form of democracy remains, its substance is slipping away. So my first question to all the panelists, and we'll begin to my left and then we'll come to my right, is Kenya's 2010 Constitution promised a new democratic dispensation. From where you sit, has this promise been fulfilled or betrayed between 2010 and today? So I'll start with Evans.
Thank you very much, Lucianna. It will be remiss of me if we don't start this conversation by not remembering Firoz Norji. Firoz Norji passed on some 3 weeks ago, and heart and soul till the very end, Norji stood for democracy, constitutionalism, and the rule of law. So I will request us to just be upstanding for 10 seconds in remembrance of Firoz Norji. Thank you. Where are we with the Constitution 2010? The wolves, the hyenas, marauding us in the name of politicians, people who think that they know, have dug their claws into the Constitution. Stealing, looting, killing. I don't know if you saw this when he was foaming in his mouth and speaking arrogantly in Parliament yesterday. Cheapening human life. That's the kind of brains we have in this country. And what has the form of undermine of the Constitution taken? We are deliberately maintaining all laws to undermine the potency of the Constitution. We are using money, corruption, to undermine the Constitution. And of course, we have nipped in the bud the reforms that were aimed to be undertaken under the auspices of the Constitution. That's why you see the police still behaving as if we are under Lord Evelyn Baring in 1952. The military that had been conducting itself properly after the Tonje reforms in 96, the military now is being muddled with politics. Those are the factors that are contributing to undermining the Constitution. It's a long conversation, but I'll keep it short for now.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank ICJ for your invitation. Thank Lucianna for moderating, and good morning, good afternoon. Is it morning or afternoon? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felix Odhiambo, the Executive Director of the Electoral Law and Governance Institute, as has been said. Now, if you look at the Kenyan constitutional pathway since the promulgation of the Kenyan Constitution in 2010, I think the starting point to appreciate, and given the background of that constitution making process, the many years of trying to have a new constitution, and then the unfortunate events in 2007, disputed elections and the post-election violence. That was the context with which the 2010 constitution was made. Now, when the constitution came into being, it has been hailed as one of the most transformative and one of the most progressive constitutional documents in the world, and that is true. And part of the reason why the Kenyan constitution stands above so many constitutions and is hailed as both progressive and transformative are because of the following. One, the elaborate chapters on the Bill of Rights, including constitutionalizing in Article 38 the political rights. The second was the reconfiguration of the state through devolution. The third was very, very progressive and elaborate chapters on representation of the people and elections in particular. And then finally, the very, very robust provisions on the doctrine of separation of powers. If you look at this against the reality on the ground, then unfortunately one can only reach the conclusion, as Dr. Evans has, that time and again we've had a series of false starts, and that the constitutional aspiration of a progressive and transformative charter has actually not been realized. Now, the worrying issue as I conclude is this. If you look at the fact that we have held 3 multi-party elections since the promulgation of the Constitution in 2010, Kenya realistically ought to have been in a phase called the consolidation phase of the Constitution. Our country reaches the consolidation phase following 3 elections after the promulgation of the Constitution. We promulgated the Constitution in 2010, had the first multi-party election in 2013, thereafter 2017 and 2022. So the 2027 electoral cycle is a consolidating electoral cycle. In the consolidation phase, the country is expected to have informed citizenry, predictable and certain laws, clear doctrines of separation of powers, very well institutionalized and vibrant political parties, among others. Now, the question that I leave you with is, if Kenya was expected to attain that consolidation phase with the 2027 general elections, where we are right now, I doubt whether we are going to reach that consolidation phase, given the very many misses that we have had in the constitutional journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And once again, a very big thank you to ICJ for extending the invitation to the Elections Observation Group. As has been said by Lucianna, my name is Marcus. I work for the Elections Observation Group, ELOG. Now, to respond to the question that Lucianna has posed, I will try to look at it in 3 ways: the good, the bad, and the ugly, in terms of the fulfillment or betrayal of our constitution. But I'm going to focus on electoral democracy, because democracy is such a wide concept. So the good aspect that I think that we have gained over time is that the quality of our elections have improved. In 2013, compared with, 2017 compared with the 2013, 2017 compared with the 2013, and 2022 compared with both 2013 and 2014. So at a technical level, our elections have improved, and I think in the region, we are hailed as one of the best in terms of conducting good elections. Now, this takes me to the bad aspect of our electoral democracy. As ELOG, we have identified 8 bad aspects of our elections. One is trust deficit. The second one, which I'm going to come back to, is non-adherence to laws. The third one is gaps in our election administration and management. The fourth one is zero-sum politics and lack of political will. The other one is lack of inclusion, the continued high costs in our elections, electoral fraud, and use of technology. Despite our employment of technology, we don't seem to get it right. But let me come back to, now those are the 8 bad aspects of electoral democracy. But let me talk about the non-adherence to laws. Now, I think PLO Lumumba spoke about it. Evans has just spoken about it. We have a very, and of course even Felix has spoken about it, we have a very progressive constitution hailed everywhere. So what is the use of a constitution that you don't adhere to? So you can have, so what we have in Kenya in terms of electoral democracy is a constitution without constitutionalism. So guys just don't care about the laws. You have them, we just don't care. So that for me is the bad aspect of our electoral democracy between 2010 and 2025. The ugly, as I conclude, is that despite all these good parts of our electoral democracy, people have continued to die. And for me, that is the ugliest aspect in the face of our elections. That we said elections is a celebration of human rights, isn't it? It is a celebration. So when people die as a result of trying to agitate for better governance, then they die. That for me is a big, big, big issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there is consensus across the board that there has been betrayal rather than the keeping of the promise of the 2010 Constitution. And I want to pick up from where Marcus has left it. The country is still in conversation about the BBC documentary that was released on Monday. And of course, as has been said, there have been mixed responses to that documentary. And irrespective of where you lie on the political divide, I think the BBC documentary did one thing for us as a nation, which is to cause us to have a national conversation about where we are going from here. That is where I want to pick up the conversation for the next part. If we look at the way the state has responded to the protest, and we looked at the speeches that were given by the president in the wake of the Gen Z protest, we saw the government imposing restrictions on demonstrations, people being told you can't demonstrate at night, you must go home by 6 o'clock. We saw the government framing protesters as criminals and issuing directives around which routes can be used, what protests can be done. And effectively what the government has been doing is clamping down on the freedom of assembly and the freedom of expression. So I want to come back to you, Evans. How do you see the law being used, this idea of the instrument of the law being used, particularly when it comes to enforcement of law and order and security laws, instead of making space for democracy to actually claw back on democracy?
Thank you, Lucianna. I want to take us back to Germany, 1919, the year 1919, August 11 specifically. They bring in a new constitution called the Weimar Constitution, the Third Reich Constitution. That constitution, like ours, had a Bill of Rights, devolved government structures. It was lauded as a good constitution. The German constitution had a shelf life of, is it less than 5 years? And part of the failure of the Reich, the Weimar Constitution, contributed partly to the First World War. So why did the Weimar Constitution collapse? It was under. So like we are doing it here, the Weimar Constitution was undermined and undermined in several ways. Part of the undermine of the Constitution 2010 in Kenya has been the maintenance of colonial laws. So for example, we have this law called the Public Law Order Act. This Public Order Act is quite repressive, it's restrictive. It requires organizers of public rallies to inform the police. Who is your IG now? I stopped following. Who is your IG? Yeah, that one. So you have to inform him and his officers that you will be demonstrating tomorrow. What do they normally do if you are a critic of government? They will tell you, we are not allowing you. There was one who was here in Nairobi, and I think we sued him, who used to tell us that I'm not going to allow you to march on the streets. Who are you to allow us? The Constitution allows us to demonstrate. Yours is to provide the conditions for the demonstration. So what they have been doing is to deny Kenyans the chance to move around in pursuance of our rights using the Public Law Order Act. Another thing that has been used, criminalization of dissent. So the Terrorism Act, the Security Laws Amendment Act, and here the judiciary sold us short, have been weaponized to target activists, journalists, persons critical of government. For security laws, I'm saying the judiciary sold us short because we wanted to control, for example, how the National Police Service Commission is dealt with. The judiciary sold us short on that. And that I'm saying boldly and unapologetically. The Cybercrimes Act of 2018. This law has been used to stymie dissent on social media. Is it this week that we saw some young man called Wafula who was taken to court? What did he do? He caused distress. Caused what again? Discomfort. Caused sleeplessness to a certain family. I ask myself, did my friend, the Director of Public Prosecution, look at that charge sheet and ask himself if those elements were met? What is that charge under penal laws? So we are using the Cybercrimes Act because certain egos have been bruised to stop young men like my brother here from exercising what they must do on social media. Excessive use of force. Transmara, Kilgoris. How many were killed? 7 or 6? And what does this MP go to tell us in Parliament? That people die and we must what? Move on? Accept and move on? Wish she was near me. I would have done what I do. I was born and bred in Eastlands. In Eastlands we say tunakuweka kibari. You have to respect human life. This is our country. Don't kill people and then you piss on us, tell us that you accept and move on. Judicial harassment and weaponized law. You're arrested, we take you to court. Your Honor, we need 21 days to investigate. And some of your magistrates and judges give those 21 days. We have politically motivated prosecutions, trumped up charges. The charges are not meant to be justice, but they are aimed at sending a message. That is what is happening. Media and civil society. The other day we had Standard Media being told what? We are going to withdraw your licenses. Citizen journalists, those ones who've been filming and sharing certain publications. What are we told? Mtajua sisi ni nani? And the problem is this. I echo Professor Lumumba. Kakistocrats, people who have nothing in between their ears, lecturing me and lecturing us. So we know what you're doing, and a time will come when that will come to an end. We have to keep at it. We have to amend these laws. We have to keep on pushing through courts, through demonstrations, exercising our civil rights to ensure that these ways of using the law to undermine the Constitution come to an end.
Thank you, Evans. I'm just going to jump to Felix. Felix, you do work in the region, and I want to tap into your regional expertise for this next question. We had a discussion early in the morning about the slow erosion of rights, and whereas Kenya has consistently been seen as a beacon of constitutional reform and liberties, it's now eroding back to an authoritarian regime. It's not a Kenyan situation only, it's a regional issue, it's a global issue. So I want you to speak to the trends that you're seeing in the region on authoritarianism, and then speak to what are you seeing in Kenya emerging as the use of the Constitution to further entrench authoritarianism.
Thank you very much, Lucianna. Now, if you look at global and regional trends, as evidenced from a number of surveys, global international surveys and regional surveys, like Afrobarometer and things like that. And if you look at the rise of populism and right wing globally and to a larger extent in the region, the rise of Donald Trump, Viktor Orban, what is the name of the Turkish Erdogan, and a number of trends and developments in Latin America and to a larger extent in Africa. There is very strong and compelling evidence that there is democratic reversals, not just in Kenya or in the African region, but comparatively across the world. Whereas the happenings, including what is happening in the United States right now, happened with a lot of drama and fanfare. The truth of the matter is this trend had begun manifesting itself in Western Europe. The only difference is that it happened with far less fanfare and drama. So there's growing evidence of democratic reversal worldwide. And that portends a worrying trend. And if for nothing else, I think it confirms the fact, and I was having this conversation with some very close friends in the US, constitutional lawyers and things like that, that democracy is a work in progress. We have in this space and doing democratic governance work, I've always showcased Western Europe and the liberal US democracy as the best case practice. But we're talking about attempts to repeal the presidential term limit in the US. We are talking about disregard to court orders, among other things. So it has different manifestation and it's happening in different countries. So yes, there is a growing reversal. There's across the board. And somebody broke it down actually in one of the surveys that worldwide, 3.1 billion people live under authoritarian regimes. That probably is more than 50%. I don't know what the current world population is. But that should portend a worrying trend. What is specific manifestation, especially here in Kenya? I think everyone has spoken to them. We are seeing the constitutional overreach of the executive and the legislature. We are seeing curtailment of fundamental rights and freedom. Evans has elaborated on that. I don't want to give those specific examples, including what it was that thing that the Eastlands people would have done. Kupiga kibare, I have no idea what that is, but yeah. Yeah, but I think what I need to emphasize is what we're also seeing in the continent, and that is state capture and elite interference in the process. And in Kenya, no sector is captured more than in the election sphere or in the electoral process itself. Now, we are in the 2027 electoral cycle, and one of the questions was on the risks that we see. If you look at 2027, first of all, we are midway in the midterm. The election is 26 months away. But if you analyze what is happening in this electoral cycle, there are comparable risks with what happened in 2007. And it behooves everyone, the state, the executive, civil society organization, to be able to pay very keen attention to this. In 2007, we said that we were caught off guard, we were caught by surprise, and there were no clear early warning indicators or comparisons. Nobody saw it coming. But look at some of the comparable risks. Number one is the state and elite interference in the process that I've said. And the state and elite means both the ruling and the opposition for avoidance of doubt. The second is, just like in 2007, there was late appointment of the Electoral Commission as the ECK as it was then. And there was a lot of bickering whether we go the IPPG route or whether President Kibaki had the unilateral powers to appoint and things like that. By the time this was settled, it was months to the election. We are right now in the process of reconstituting IEBC, and this is a carbon copy of what happened in 2007. The electoral reforms agenda, just like it was in 2007, is late and piecemeal. That has been the trend. And then the other thing is historical. If you look at the kind of the campaign narrative that is being formulated It's pretty much what was there in 2007. And clearly, as we go to 2027, it's increasingly becoming clear that the mountain, the region, and the Rift Valley will not stick together. Now, in this country, in every election where the mountain and the Rift voted separately, there has been electoral violence. 97, 207, and there are all indications that that is happening. And then finally is the remobilization of the militia, the Mongikis of this world. Like that, for those of you who have been following even the ODM party elections in Nyanza province, the kind of violence that there was, and the unleashing of the militia to disrupt and things like that. And this is across the board, both the ruling party and the opposition party. So there are comparable risks in 2007 to 2027 that we should not close eyes to. Of course, there are mitigating factors. We have the Gen Zs now. It was not there in 2007, but also we have a strong judiciary. And by the way, if you look at what happened in 2007, in the run-up to that election, there was a deliberate, orchestrated attempt to delegitimize the judiciary. And we are seeing it happening now, including, to a larger extent, the Supreme Court. So these are comparisons that we cannot close our eyes to, and I think I should leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Felix. You've given us a broad context and you've narrowed down to Kenya and what we should look out for in 2027, which is precisely what we are looking for as we have the conversation about how do we move forward. So thank you for that. I want to switch quickly to Marcus, because his work and ELOG's work is to also deal with election integrity issues and to monitor the work of institutions. And Marcus, I'd like you to speak to us about what you're seeing in terms of institutional preparedness, institutional strengths and weaknesses. What are the specific gaps that we should focus on in terms of strengthening civic monitoring, strengthening observation as we go into 2027?
Thank you very much. In 2022, we had about 40,000 plus polling stations, if I remember. So ideally, if you are to speak to the integrity of the E-Day processes, then you would then have 40,000 plus observers stationed at the polling stations. That would be comprehensive enough. For instance, for our own elections in 2022, ELOG deployed about 5,108 observers that were spread across the polling stations. So we used a methodology that allowed us to sample the polling stations. Now, we are moving into 2027. We expect the number of voters to increase, and therefore the number of polling stations to increase. So the first gap that we see as ELOG is the fact that observers are limited in terms of presence in polling stations. And that, for us, is a big issue, because then there are situations where ELOG can speak to. So that is a big issue. But of course, we are recognizing resources that limit us. But also there is a new trend that then perhaps at some point we'll talk about how then to address that issue. The second issue that we see as a weakness as we move into 2027 is inadequate observer training and coordination. So you have a number of organizations deploying observers. Questions have risen in terms of the competence of those observers that are deployed. Now, you can go into a polling station. Yeah, so you can go to one polling station, you'll find like 3 different observers in a polling station. And the nearby polling station, there is no observer. So if we could coordinate our deployment criteria and mechanisms, that would really help. So I think that idea of lack of coordination is something that we think we need to address. And then lastly, just because of, 2 more last things, the question around technology and data capacity. We have become very sophisticated in terms of transmission of election results. So we heavily rely on technology. So to what extent are our observers equipped to speak to electronic transmission of our results? Do they have the capacity to speak to that? And then the last point I want to address here is the credibility of civil society organizations. Are we trusted? Are we trusted? Are we trustable? Or are we being bought because of either our leaning? So I think for me that's a big issue. If they don't trust us, then we become like them. So observers then are treading in a very thin line. One of our founders said that our relationship with the authorities should be like that how we relate with fire. If you are too close to fire, you burn, isn't it? If you are too far away from fire, you freeze. So ours is uneducated closeness to authority that allows us to speak truth to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And again, I think what you've spoken to about the divided civic society is part of what led to the uprising in 2024. Young people coming to the street and saying, no one is speaking for us anymore, we must come and speak for ourselves. And so I want us to segue now into discussing youth activism and civic mobilization, because one of the questions which people keep asking is, we went to the streets in 2024, people died. Was there value in going to the streets? What are we going to do differently? So I think what I want every one of us on the panel to reflect on is, how can we channel the momentum which was built last year and in my assessment has been re-energized by the release of the documentary to now sustainably take back civic space as we prepare for 2027. So I'll start with Evans.
Thank you. First and foremost, may I thank the various youths in this country choking under the weight of unemployment, poverty, and all the ills and vices that characterize the face of this country. There is hope. We will get there someday. In terms of how do we sustain the momentum from June last year, number one, let us organize but decentralize. So we avoid reliance on leaders. You've seen that some people who come and you parade as leaders, they go meet certain politicians and they hop on helicopters. Avoid leaders, faceless. Leverage on digital tools. We have to use social media for mobilization, for civic emancipation. Number three, build a clear, unified agenda. What is your agenda? How do you partner with those that are like-minded like you? Let's have more beyond the reactive protests. We don't react to kitu imefanyika, we are out in the streets. Let's be more thoughtful. And this one tapped to the history of yesteryears. We had 4 Cs, Kivuta Kivuana, David Alamba. Those who are there, they were more proactive, not reactive. Because if you're reactive, these people will always know how to bait, click you, and deal with you. Demand specific constitutional and legal changes. We have laws that need to be repealed, certain parts of the Constitution that need to be repealed. We have the OCO report on the audit of the Constitution, the cost of maintaining politicians and their luxuries, the big cars. It's not sustainable for us. We need to bring down the costs of running government. We need to bring down the number of MCAs and counties in line with the OCO report. We need to engage in continuous civic action. It's not for me to tell you what civic action is. Engage in civic action. Follow the Constitution in engaging the civic action, which requires peaceful demonstration, peaceful civic activity. Strengthen grassroots mobilization. Counter state repression using the courts internally and out there. We have had certain politicians who think that they are beyond the law. We have seen that we can sue out there. We have had 1 or 2 cases on the basis of universal jurisdiction. So we can use those avenues to hold impunity and those who perpetrate impunity to account. So there are many ways in which the momentum can be sustained. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Evans. I think Evans has spoken pretty much what I also wanted to say in terms of specific interventions and specific areas to focus on. I don't want to repeat anything that he has said, save to say two things. One, I think I was encouraged by PLO. I must confess, having been in this space in the electoral process since Kivuitu, sometimes you really, really get frustrated whether we are moving forward or whether we are moving backwards. And if you're in my generation, you will begin to tire, especially if you do this, if you've been doing this for a long time. But I think the parting shot that if we don't succeed, our children will succeed. And if they don't succeed, their children will succeed. It should be a unifying call. Let me add two things to expand on what Dr. Aria said. One is that with respect to safeguarding these fundamental rights and freedoms, and given the constitutional prominence of contained in the chapter on the Bill of Rights, and how do we safeguard and protect, especially the Gen Zs in the protest, because we all saw what happened. Then now more than ever, the judiciary must be called into action. I think if you compare the performance of the judiciary vis-a-vis the arms of government, the judiciary has tried. There is problems here and there, but to a larger extent, the judiciary has tried. But I think moving forward, to safeguard the enjoyment of these fundamental rights and freedoms, the judiciary would have to be called upon to be even more robust and to be even more authoritative in pushing back against the reversals of some of the gains that are contained in the 2010 Constitution. The second and final thing is that all that efforts, and I think we have a lot to celebrate from the protests that we saw last year, from the Gen Zs and to a larger extent the millennials. We've never seen anything like that. So what is the end game? The end game is to ensure as much as possible that that energy is channeled towards participating in the next elections. If you look at the 2022 voter registration data, we registered about slightly over 21 million voters. And if you look at the turnout in 2022, out of the 21 million voters, 14 million participated in that elections. It means close to 9 million or thereabouts did not participate. Now, when the IEBC was published the voter registration data of the 21 million, in the IEBC's own report, there was drastic reduction in the number of the young people who registered between 18 and 35. And it was attributed to a larger extent to voter apathy, among other things. So it means the young people did not register and participate effectively in that election, and the jury is out there on the 9 million who did not vote in 2022, whether the majority comprised the young people. I think there is no data to that effect. But between 2022 and 2027, it is estimated that 5.6 million young people will turn of age, will turn 18 years old to be able to participate in the 2027 elections. Now, if you compute that number, the 5.6 million who will be eligible to vote, the youth who did not register in 2022, and certainly the number of people who did not turn out to vote in 2022, I can bet you there is that is a major force that will have significant say on the outcome of 2027 general elections. So the key is for the young people to register and participate in the electoral process. Thank you.
Okay, let's have Marcus give us his thoughts on that before we...
I would like then to probably just highlight a few more points, 2 or 3. First is that, again, learning from the protests. You see, elections belong to the people. It's essentially a people-driven process. And so if they do not see the dividends of elections, then they will rebel. whether the young, the old, they will rebel. And so what we saw in June last year is what essentially should be a force to plan. And so I look at the election management bodies, broadly speaking, whether the media, whether the election observers, whether the EMB, they should tap into that new wave. And I think I'm looking at the digital and tech platforms, that they should make use of those platforms to mobilize the youth, if possible, maybe legal reforms, even to register the youth virtually. To educate, so mobilize, educate them using those platforms, but also the second aspect for me is support safe digital platforms where civic dialogue can be held, fact-finding, of course, because with the digital spaces, there's a lot of myths and there's a lot of spread of myths and disinformation. So then how do you also use these platforms to fact-find and debunk lots of those that are coming out? And then lastly, of course, just institutionalize youth engagement through formal and informal channels, because then without that form of organization, then we are heading nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all my panelists. And I can see time is flying. I wish we had more time for this conversation, but we want to bring you into the conversation. So I'm going to take one last question for the panel, and then we will open it up to plenary. And my last question, again, is just based on the idea that we want to build a collective vision for the way forward. So I want each of the panelists for a minute or so to just tell us, if they had a wish list, what is the one concrete thing that they believe, if it was implemented, would help us to renew Kenya's democracy and build trust in the process going into 2027? So we'll start with Evans.
One thing we have to get right is Chapter 6, ethics and integrity. Because if ethics and integrity, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, was faithfully implemented, I bet about 95% of those in politics will go home. So we have to look at Chapter 6, and Chapter 6 can be implemented in a variety of ways, and perhaps what we have never considered is constitutional conventions. Kibaki tried tinkering with constitutional conventions, but it was not discipline in terms of implementation. We need to apply pressure for constitutional conventions and think of innovatively urging constitutional conventions through the court system as well. Thank you.
I think a lot of attention would have to be paid on elections management and administration. And this is particularly so for the men and women who will have the privilege to be the next IEBC commissioners. In this country, the closest we've ever come to civil war was in 2007. And the Kriegler report was clear that it was because of the management of the Electoral Commission at the time. Kenya has held 7 multi-party elections. The 2027 election will be the 8th. And within which time we have changed the composition, structure, and outlook of election management 7 times, and the process that is ongoing right now as we speak will be the 8th time we are changing the IEBC, so to speak. I think it should be very clear. If you look at what is happening now, it should be very clear to the country that political legitimacy is acquired through the ballot. Through a very well-managed and efficient electoral commission. It's acquired through the ballot. It's not acquired through, and this was a lesson in 2002. For those of you who remember the legitimacy and the goodwill the Kibaki administration then had. Political legitimacy, as evidenced by the very many coalitions that we have had and alliances, is not acquired through forming party coalitions. If you look at what is happening, and I've had this discussion with my ODM and UDA friends, if you look at the only reason to form the handshake government and now the broad-based government was to bring political legitimacy on the table. But rather than give that legitimacy, for those of you who have followed the politics of, say, Raila Odinga, for example, the coalition actually ended up delegitimizing Raila, as evidenced by the social media platforms, as evidenced by the booing. Raila has never been booed in Kisii, for example, or lukewarm reception in Luanyanza. So it actually delegitimized him, and there is no evidence that the government was legitimized by that action. What I'm talking about is that we must remember political legitimacy is acquired through the ballot and not through alliances and coalitions.
I would like to give my comment as follows. There's a phrase that I've just opened here. The illiterate of our century will not be those who cannot read and write. I think it echoes what P.L. Lumumba was saying about how the Greeks divided their democracy. Are not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn and relearn. As we move to 2027, I think for me, the one thing that we must do is to unlearn bad manners that we have within ourselves. I think you use the part of the Bible tells us don't steal. Many of you who drive in the night, there are no cops on the road, the signs is red, but you just proceed. You don't need anyone to show you that red means stop. So if we don't unlearn bad manners, then it will not save us as we move to 2027. So I think for me, I want to single out bad manners. If we can just have some internal renewal and just learn good manners, I think we can be better people.
Thank you. Thank you to my panelists. And I have just a few minutes before we go to our lunch break. And I'd like to open up the floor now to the plenary. Maybe you can just indicate by a show of hand if you have a question or a comment that you would like to make, and then the microphone will come to you. So because of time, allow me to just take 5. So I'll start at the back. That's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. There's one more slot going once, going twice, and it's gone. So let's start at the back, kindly. So if you have a question or a comment and you would like it addressed by a particular panelist, please feel free to just direct it to them so that they can take it at the end.
Okay. My name is Timothy. My comment is on, because we are going through a preparation period for the elections. Reading the stories after Kibaki became president in 2002, the 2 stories I have come across was about the regrouping of what was then known as Mount Kenya Mafia. And it went to Kibaki and said, no, you cannot make changes too fast. Because they wanted the slots, they also wanted the money, they wanted the benefits. And I think what we must do is for the younger generation, which is yearning to go for seats, is to remind them that the old order will also regroup and will come to them with money for campaign, and you to also come to them as soon after they win the seats, whether they win the seats for MCA or the other seats, they will come so that to try and buy or pay back some of the losses. So my comment is that to all of us, we have an obligation to tell those who are running for seats, and by the way, I have no intention of voting for anyone older than me. I'm among the older millennials. I have no intention of voting for the older than me, but also to remind people that it is not an opportunity to enrich yourself or to reach your dreams that you have not achieved. It is an opportunity to serve. So that would be the first thing. But then the other issue is because the panelists have significant, have spaces where they could speak to the next generation, is about whether any of them intends to spend their time to talk to the potential candidates that we have about service, about mobilizing resources. Because most of the time, whoever funds you then will demand for something after election. Whether any of them is willing, from ELOG to Daktari, whether anyone is willing to talk about that, and us getting resources from within. The dollar that I can give is also the dollar that could come from Europe or the US. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. There was a hand behind Shukri. Then we'll come to you, ma'am. We'll come to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Odhiambo. I'm an activist. And I want to start by saying that I appreciate the reforms that Kenyans have. My only concern and worry to the panel is that, why is it that the discussions in standing to making young people believe that why is it that most of the panelists there are tending to make us believe that the real change that we want, the total liberation that Kenyans want, should only come through the ballot? Why is it that you only think about the ballot? Because, why am I saying this? We have been having elections since independence, and we've been having reforms again since independence. And we can also count what elections have been giving us. They have been giving us thieves. People have been killed during election time. We've been having conmen legitimizing their conmanship. Why do you think that is? And again, look at the election results are being determined before the election process is determined. The people who are identifying the commissioners were decided by the same criminals in the name of politicians. So why must you people compel us to get into their game by allowing ourselves to vote, and we all know their intention? Hakuna njia ingine ya kudeal na hawa wakora in both sides. Ya pili is in the current political and legal situation. Again, we are citizens of this country, but we are also the people. Why are you people always compelling us to behave as citizens? Hatuwezi operate also as we the people. Lazima tukue so conformist to those rules that put us down. I think we must also remember Thomas Sankara. A little element of madness is important. so that certain things can be done with clarity in future. What are your take on those two issues? Thank you.
I'm assuming that for both Timothy and the gentleman, it's all the panelists that you want to speak to your questions? Okay. All right. Ma'am, next.
Good afternoon. So my question is, what is the state of our justice system? Because yesterday I would say, go to court, I believe in our judiciary, but today our Chief Justice, who apparent is the President of the Supreme Court, is also crying for justice, and yet the presidential elections are listened by the Supreme Court. Thank you so much.
Thank you for making your question concise as well. I think there was a final hand at this table, and that's it.
Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Habib Omar. First of all, is to appreciate the panelists for their insight and allowing us also to be able to learn, but maybe a challenge to us because we do a lot of talking. And in terms, with an intention of taking this conversation to the grassroots level, maybe from the three of you in your various institutions, what are plans that you have so that, again, we can be able to take this conversation at the grassroots level? And how are you working with grassroots organization at the grassroots level to be able to continue spearheading this agenda? Then the last question, we always keep on talking about Chapter 6 of the Constitution. In majority, if not 90% of the current leadership do not meet Chapter 6 of the Constitution. So then, how do we make it a reality? The last question is about we the people, because the sovereignty power belongs to us. But we are dealing with a systemic problem where we have the killers, the conmen, and everybody regrouping. And because they want the status quo to remain the same. So how again do we challenge this in your own thinking? All of you, I know, have been very critical in terms of aspect of election and ensuring that the will of the people at the end of the day count. Because the concern of Onjiro is, at the end of the day, we have a predetermined election outcome. So then how do we change the game altogether?
Thank you. I'll allow the panelists.
There's one more, Lucianna.
Oh, okay.
Viva, comrades, viva. My name is Wangoi Wanjora. I come from the social justice movement, Nairobi chapter. And I'm grateful to be here. And I've been listening to this conversation here from the back. And I think I have something I can share. So my point is leaning towards Ojiro's point kidogo. And when people fight, when we go to the streets to protest, we are not fighting for ideas. We are fighting for material benefit. We are fighting for good health care. We are fighting for accountability in those public offices. We are fighting for jobs. It is estimated about 1 million people graduate each academic year in this country. And these people don't get jobs. Not even half of the people get jobs. And these people are people who are educated enough. They are people who are in a position to be leaders. They are people who are in a position to provide solutions. So when we talk about reforms, and we talk about so many reforms, and we keep talking about reforms, and we keep talking about ideas, people get angry. And in this room, I am a little bit sad because I did not hear any solution, any tangible solution. Because we can be in a position, when you talk about 2027 elections, organizations that have been represented here are in a position to give us a vanguard of a party. So that when we are, my brother here said he's not going to vote for anybody older than him. So that we give these young people a platform that is not UDA, that is not ODM. Because all these are going to bring a lot of conformity to these people that we are electing, no matter how sanctified they are. And so when we sit here and we talk about 2027 and we talk about people voting, and we are not providing the car, we are just providing the destination to where we are going. It's heartbreaking because I come from Ngong Social Justice Center. And when I stand here, I represent massive number of people from Ngong. And when I get out of this room without a tangible solution that I can present, and I'm not alone, all these people are coming from institutions, and we get out of here with reforms. We can't keep instilling these reforms. We can't keep talking about, we have a constitution, the 2010, and we have not even actualized doing what the constitution is saying. So we can't keep, I think it's very painful coming from a grassroots level because we are being looked upon by so many people. So we have the shoes, we have to wear those shoes in actual terms of providing healthcare, of providing education, of providing tangible solutions to these ideas that take people to the streets. And the reason why people go to the streets is because they feel that they are not being tangible enough. And when we talk about numbers in the streets, these are tangible things. You can actually see these numbers. You can actually see these angered people. You can actually see these dead people. And it's so sad that we have to lose lives. People have to die. Right now, I think watu walikuwa kwa maandamano wanasuffer. So even mentally, because it's not a good sight. So we don't love experiencing these things. But either way, you stay home, you go to maandamano, you'll still die. Because you don't have anywhere to eat, you don't have education to provide to your children, you don't have health care. Mothers are dying in hospitals, giving birth to children. In this century, it's so sad. Thank you.
Let me just acknowledge the vulnerability with which you shared and to thank you so much for what you've spoken. Thank you. I believe you've spoken for very many in the room. And whether or not we are young, we're not downplaying the concerns that you have. I think anyone living in Kenya today can acknowledge that what you're saying is a personal concern, whether or not we are Gen Zs or millennials. And that is why even when we went to the demonstrations, it wasn't just Gen Z demonstrations. I like to call them Gen Z-led demonstrations. But what you are saying is something that we were feeling, and that is why I'm grateful that we are having this intergenerational dialogue. But because there are experts to whom these questions and comments are addressed, allow me to allow them to respond. And I know that there will be a dialogue after lunch. This is not the end of the conversation. I know after lunch we'll have a deeper discussion on economic questions. So let's dive deeper into that also after lunch. But for now, allow me to invite the panelists to respond, and we close.
Okay. Timothy, good to see you. The resource question, I agree with you. We need to mobilize better. That is a conversation that I think is valid, and we can take it up in the future. Ojiro is Marxist in his thinking. This vote thing is not helping us. And for those who are making policy decisions and those in charge of this country, listening to Ojiro and Wanjora, it's a wake-up call for us. We are sitting on a time-ticking bomb. There's a book called God's Terrorist by somebody called Chris Hedges. And God's Terrorist gives you the origin of suicide bombing. The first suicide bomber was a woman, Lucianna. And suicide bombing was born out of desperation, people having nothing to lose. So whoever is sitting in office in this country needs to know that when people lose faith in institutions, lose faith in the ballot, they'll go for the alternatives. Your V8s, your fortified buildings, Pielo Lumumba told us in the morning, will not help you. You have to have a renewal in the vote, in the ballot, in institutions. The arrogance that I saw in Parliament yesterday, the arrogance and the utter contempt that I see in our politicians today will not help you. We have a time-ticking bomb, and like I said, Chris Hedges, the God's Terrorist, the first suicide bombing event in the world was by a lady, not an Arab, a Sinhalese lady who bombed Rajiv Gandhi in 1990, and that was out of desperation. That's the desperation I hear from Ojiro and Wanjora. We need to watch. The state of our justice system, that's my final response. I'll be lying to you if I told you you are perfect. I do a lot of research and ask a lot of questions in the judiciary. We have a problem that needs to be addressed. They have done well, considerably well. We have judges who are doing what needs to be done. We have problems in the judiciary. They need to pull up their socks. We have problems with corruption in that judiciary. They need to be solved. So you can rely on us to keep them on their, put their souls on fire, keep check on them, report instances that you need to report, talk to friends in media, talk to friends in law society, reach out to some of us. If you have anything, we know what to do with that information.
Very quickly, thank you very much for your questions. And we, as like I said, and I think Lucianna mentioned, we share in those frustrations, especially some of us who have actually lived longer, that we have very little to show for serious progress since this country attained independence in '63. And I think I agree with Evans. PLO articulated some of those and painted that picture very well. And my sister from Ngong, I feel you. I stay in Ngong as well, and it's nice to meet you. We did a political economy analysis as an organization to try and explain why things are the way they are, especially in the democratic governance landscape and in the electoral process landscape as well. And one of the things that we came up with, which explains part of the frustration and explains the Gen Z-led protest, was what we're calling jobless growth. Since President Kibaki introduced free primary education in 2003, at least 5 cohorts have graduated from colleges of higher learning and universities. And whereas in every administration since 2003, and give Kibaki's due, I think he tried in the economic front. There have been talks of projected economic growth. The problem is that this economic growth is not felt, is not a widely shared prosperity, and is not felt by the majority of the countries. And the 5 or so cohorts of free primary education, free education as it were, who graduated in colleges of higher learning cannot be absorbed in the job market, and hence that terminology, jobless growth. So we're talking of an economy and economic growth, but it can't be felt. And I think this was a major issue. My brother Ogiro, I feel you as well. But I want to persuade you that there are a number of initiatives beyond elections. Not everybody has to participate in the electoral process or even run for elective office. But I shudder to imagine what the alternative is. If you look at the way the governance architecture is formulated, I mean, we are in the NGO world, almost all of us, civil society organization. The progressive initiatives such as the social justice movement, Bungela, what is it called? Bungela Wananchi, those forums are crucial and effective and affirms or confirm the fact that it doesn't have to be necessarily through elections. But I want to persuade you that there's just about very, very few things that we can do outside of the elective offices. Now, when the Gen Z-led protest happened, it sent very serious fears to the governance architecture. And if you look at the percentages that I gave in terms of the demographics trend and the number of young registered voters between the ages of 18 and 35, it is sending a very clear message. But my fear is that if the young people do not come up and participate in these elective offices, it's going to be business as usual. It's going to be business as usual. So whereas there are a number of forums that you can articulate yourself and things like that, to the extent that the political space is controlled by the same people that you are seeking to transform this country, and from what we are hearing, there's very little hope that that would happen, then there's very little that we can achieve. And that is why I was encouraging the young people that that power that was demonstrated last year, if it is harnessed properly and channeled towards the various elective discourses, whether as voters or seeking elective offices, because you showed us that this country can have a movement that is tribeless, leaderless, and classless, and things like that, and achieve that. Some of us have been tainted by the divisions of the past and the tribalism and ethnicity and things like that. But you guys, the Gen Z-led protest, the Gen Zs and the millennials, demonstrated that there can be a new way of doing things in this country that can be impactful and lead to transformative change.
Thank you very much. Evans, you remember we were in Tanzania, Arusha, at the ASCOF summit when these things were happening, and we went outside there to join the Kenyan colleagues and singing our slogans. I was afraid. I was visibly afraid of what I was seeing. I couldn't believe it. I think we've had mandamanos before, but what we saw in June last year was significant. For me, the change will happen. It's just a question of time. It will happen. Now, as to whether we have another way of bringing change outside the ballot, if we were to go by constitutionalism, I think our progressive constitution ordains that we vote in and out leaders. We, the people, have determined that as a way of governance. We will stick to it. If it does not work, then we should collectively then look for another way. Is it a bullet? Do you want us to go to the bullet way as we are seeing in Sudan? So I think the options are very limited. I think Anne Kathurima, who is here, has asked me this question during break. She told me, do you want us to go, what is his name, Anne? The president of Traore. Do you want a Traore way for Kenya? I don't know. We make the decision as a country. As of today, the ballot is the way. Lastly, you asked the question about how we move the grassroots. I'll speak about ELOG. In ELOG, we have devolved our structures because elections, as I said before, belong to the people, and elections are held at the local level. So we have 8 regions, which we call the regional observation platform. So we have 8 of them. So we are still trying to ensure that elections are devolved to the lowest possible level. That's all I can say. Thank you very much, Lucianna.
Thank you. Allow me to request you to just give a warm round of applause to our panelists, Evans Ogada, Felix Odhiambo, and Marcus Ageng'a. I think it's clear from the conversation that we were having today was whether we have lived up to the promise of the Constitution. And it's clear from the conversation that Kenya's democratic transition story has been a story of betrayal. So we've spoken about repression, we've spoken about exclusion, and it's clear that what we intended with the Constitution is not happening. So what we are living out is a situation of a hollowed out democracy. We have elections that have no capacity to change the way in which people are living, and that's why we are having this conversation. We are living through a time of impunity, captured institutions, a very shrinking civic space, and at the same time, elite deals are being made to sideline the will of the people. Yet, in that same time, we are people who are demonstrating that there is still room for courage. There is still room to use the courts. There is still room to use the streets and social media and organize for the Kenya that we want. The challenge now is how do we reconstruct this resistance so that we have a system that protects rights, that centers what the people want and rejects business as usual. I want to end with a rallying call. And I will quote here someone like Wendell Phillips, who said, "Eternal vigilance is the price that we pay for liberty. Power is ever stealing from the many to the few." Our call here is to eternal vigilance. We cannot stop. Even if we don't realize it in our generation, we owe it to our children and to our children's children to remain vigilant for the democracy that we want. And if we defend daily, deliberately, and together, then Kenya can be what we want it to be. Allow me to hand over the program back to the ICJ Kenya team and to thank you for your time.
This panel has been fantastic, hasn't it been? So I noticed that you touched on a few things even in your conversations. The role of the youth, the question around security, the question around corruption. That is going to be very well situated in the afternoon panel. So as you have lunch, all the questions that you have already asked, we have factored them in the panel. Another question that I heard was asked was whether ICJ is only working in Nairobi. We do work within the 6 paralegal networks that we do have, Kitui, Meru, Laikipia, Transmara, Kwale. However, during the election, we also brought in other paralegals to assist. So maybe the running call that we should have is, what will be your role during the 2027 election? Will you just be a voter? Or if ELOG calls for more vigilance? They had 5,000 stations manned, but there are 44. We don't know if the number will increase to 66,000. Actually, I think it should increase to 66,000 because with the voter population going up, it means you have to create more stations in order to accommodate the numbers and the KIMS kit to relay the information, right? So what will that mean? We will need more people at the polling stations to observe. Will you volunteer your time? Will you volunteer your expertise? Will you be the observer? I'll leave that to you.